I see so much out there about executive coaching now more than ever on LinkedIn, all over the place. And we have lots of executive coaches that work through our programs. And so I kind of thought about, wow, is this only for C-level executives? Like, has coaching changed? And so I thought of Melisa immediately when we thought about doing something like this, because she has a lot of experience, not just with coaching, but Melisa, I really love your story and your journey. You did not start out your career as an executive coach, as I understand it, right? You were actually a technology leader. Tell us a little bit about how you went from tech leader to executive coach.
Okay, great. And so good to be here. Thank you to everyone. So my journey was what I call an accidental entrepreneur, an accidental consultant. I won't give you the whole backstory, but essentially I was on the executive team of a SaaS software company that I helped to start, and had built that to a mid-sized company. And at that time, my husband had a little bit of a midlife crisis and decided he wanted to go back to school, which took us to Hawaii.
Wow.
And as a result, I had to, and I say this, it sounds crazy, but I had to resign. And I thought it was the worst thing that could ever happen to me, moving to Hawaii. I was wrong, but nonetheless, at the time, it felt like that. And so when I resigned, I just thought that there was the end of my career and really didn't know what would happen next. I didn't have the forethought at that time to say to my company, I would love to be a consultant.
Huh.
I can be an individual contributor. I just can't lead a team from Hawaii. Luckily, the CEO saw that opportunity and put it in front of me. I honestly don't know that I ever would have thought of myself as a consultant or as an independent.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think that seems to happen to a lot of people, right? They kind of end up there.
Exactly. Yeah. So it became this accidental thing and I started management consulting, helping other startup companies, first my former employer, and then ultimately my other startups to scale their businesses. And I really enjoyed it. But what I found is half of the work was helping the companies put processes in place, and the other half was very much more on the emotional side, where the CEO would pull me aside, or the CTO, or some other director, and say, I'm having these challenges with delivering. Mm-hmm. What do you think about this? And so it made me really think back to my corporate days, and what I enjoyed so much in that role too is the mentoring and the coaching and helping other people to see their potentially before they even see it for themselves, and help guide them through the process to feel better about what they're doing, be more effective, and ultimately reach the goals that they want to
reach
accomplish.
Their goals. So you really started out as a management consultant to your ex-employer, which I think again is a very typical way that ICs end up there. Yeah. And then kind of found this love of mentoring and coaching along the way.
Yeah.
Do you think today that executive coaches are being used at more than just the C-level in organizations?
Yeah, when I fell into coaching, I didn't know that it was so accessible to so many different types of people. What had happened for me is I started to branch out from management consulting into other business endeavors, just kind of testing things out. Right. And I was really struggling. And so one of my friends just recommended, hey, there's a coach that helps with, with starting new online businesses. Reach out to her and see if she can help. And so that was my first exposure to coaching. I talked with her. She understood what it was like to start an online business from scratch. And so I started working with her. And I realized that this is actually a thing, that there are so many different types of coaches for so many different types of goals that you might have or challenges you might be.
Yeah, you and I had discussed some of that, and that was news to me. I just thought of coaches I kind of thought of it from a leadership development or career potential, but there's some very specific coaches as well, right? And you've had multiple ones, right, for different things.
Yeah, I always have a coach, sometimes more than one, because I believe in the value of it so much. And so, yeah, there are general coaches who can help with broader, there are life coaches
Sure.
that just help with, kind of the personal and professional side, whatever the topic might be at such a general level. There are business
Mhm.
coaches that help with things like scaling your business, and then there are niche coaches, people that might help you troubleshoot just your close rate, for example.
Yeah, so interesting. And you were saying
Yeah,
pitch coaches, which I
pitch
see
coaches. Yeah,
people needing that in the sales world of just focusing on what is your pitch.
yeah,
So coaching's become a lot more accessible and used by individuals, really outside of just the management structure.
mhm.
What types of things do you think somebody should think about before they contemplate, even Asia mentioned, like, I don't know, I've never used one. Gee, do I need one?
Yeah.
What should people think about when they answer that question for themselves?
Yeah, I think the first thing that they really need to think about is what are their goals and why haven't they achieved them yet?
Yeah,
For a lot of us, we think we just need more time. Generally, it's never "I need more time." There's something that's holding you at the level of achievement that you've accomplished so far, and
right.
being able to really look at what is holding you back, and could you get some external help from that
And
to
so do
push
people
through.
have like really specific objectives that they come to a coach with? Like I want to grow my business to 5 new clients, or I want to increase my delivery, my cost of
Mhm.
delivery, and things like
Yeah.
that. Does it get that specific, or is it just overall business strategy?
It usually gets very specific.
Huh.
So I want to have a solid pipeline so that I don't have spikiness in my
Yeah,
revenue. Or, if I don't solve this problem, I'm going to have to go back to corporate full time, and I don't want to.
that was a
Um,
tagline I thought you came up with that was pretty good. Like, you don't have to go back to corporate America.
no,
There's another way, right?
there's another way. Yeah.
And so I was interested in this subject because we obviously work with lots of independent consultants that are looking for that next project, or also really love the work they're doing and enjoy that freedom of
Mhm.
focusing on projects that they really like with clients that they really like and choose. But it's scary to think about, once my network dries up, where do I go? We certainly have all these marketplaces now. Our marketplace is one. There are several other ones out there. And so I think companies are trying to get more accessible with project work direct,
Mhm.
but that alone sometimes isn't enough.
Mhm.
And so I think it's helping people through that. And it sounds like you kind of developed a methodology around how do you do that? And is this specific to IC? So you've been working with ICs on building your business.
Yes. Yeah, what I've built is 4 foundations of what it means to be a successful IC. And I think a lot
Okay.
of us, myself included, when I was management consulting, focused so much on the delivery, which is just one of those pillars.
Okay.
The other pillars are putting on our business owner hats and being able to create a repeatable process where you're attracting and
Mhm.
cultivating leads so that you've always got opportunities available to you. And then
And filling up
also,
a pipeline and not just
yeah,
waiting until the
that's right.
project's over to move
Yeah.
to the next one.
Yeah.
Um,
And then the one that the third pillar is about closing those deals. And really, so many of us as consultants don't think of ourselves as salespeople. We
mhm.
think of a lot of times we're on the back end of what someone's oversold and trying to, like,
Fix
fix the
it.
problem. So when I was in corporate, my CEO would call me sales repellent because I was, in the mode of let's be, let's set the proper expectations. And so
Right.
getting to the place where you're really thinking of yourself as a salesperson and knowing that the skills that developed as a consultant are really sales skills. There's nothing that you're missing from a skill set perspective. It's a mental construct that getting yourself to the place where you start feeling comfortable with selling and see yourself as someone who's can be successful at selling.
And can get good at it.
Yeah.
The things that I was really curious about that you and I have talked about is, what do you see people change? So, a lot of times people have been at this and maybe they're, they get lucky in some cases, and then others, they have a dry spell. When they come to work with you as a coach, what are the differences that take them from, being frustrated to really successful running their own business?
Yeah, the biggest thing that people come in with, they think that they should need help solving things like, how do I balance? How do I balance delivery
Mhm.
with marketing and sales? How do I
Yeah,
make more time in the day? How do I get better at time management? Those kinds of things are on the surface what feels like needs to be solved, or how do I
right,
learn sales skills when I feel like I don't have them? But really underneath that is what I find is the biggest game changer for people is really their self-concept.
hmm,
Most of us who have become either on purpose or accidental ICs still think of ourselves in a lot of ways as an employee. We
oh,
think about and all of the constructs that come with that versus adjusting and upgrading our self identity to really think of ourselves as an entrepreneur and the CEO that we are, which
mhm.
requires us and is an opportunity for us to work both on our business as well as in our
Yeah,
business
because that
and
is a
find the
challenge, I
balance.
imagine, for, you're the delivery mechanism as well as the person that has to worry about filling up that pipeline. So a lot of people
Yeah.
have an employee mindset, I guess, and they don't, do they not realize it? I mean, I could see how that is not very obvious to them.
Yeah, it's really hard to realize because a lot of time as consultants, we're problem solvers. We want to
Uh-huh.
go in and figure out, how do I solve this problem? How can I juggle my calendar between business development and delivery? And that's usually not the core of the challenge. The core of the challenge is usually feeling resistant, or being afraid of failure, or feeling inadequate in the skills
Yeah,
that you might not have, that might not be quite as strong yet, like in marketing and sales,
right.
business development, and starting to rebuild that part of your self concept and self identity so that it does come more naturally. There isn't so much resistance to doing it, and it can create this consistent pattern where then your results are having and attracting that consistent business moving forward.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I also think one of the things you had mentioned before too is just shining a light on your own business every week.
Mm,
So
yeah.
like anything that you focus on, when we all think about it, no matter what it is, typically gets better if you work on it.
Mhm.
If you're not thinking about your business as a business and how are you going to balance or fill up your funnel and spend time on all those things. So a lot of what you're doing with IC clients is really, shining a light on that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Just by way of having a weekly call every week, it's
Mhm.
a forcing function to help those ICs take a moment, take a step back, think about at a higher level about what's going
Mhm.
on with their business versus the delivery, and gives them that space to have a sounding board of someone who's been there and done that and
Yeah.
has the empathy for it, but also can ask the hard questions. So you're seeing your blind spots and where you're in your own way, so you can keep moving forward and growing.
And I guess ultimately that goal of sales, because I mean, I hear the same thing that, and I understand most ICs really like the work they do. They'll like their clients. It's that funnel of sales, and sales sometimes is a bad word to people that, because it has a connotation of being salesy.
Mhm.
It sounds like you help people to figure out it really isn't like that. And some of these, whether it's networking or learning how to talk about your business better, or understanding you do have those skills, even if you haven't been very confident about it. Tell me a little bit about, as you work on things like that with people tangibly, what things have you seen change?
Yeah, what I've seen change are things like a complete resistance to networking. Like,
Ah,
this is a waste of time. It feels like it's going to take too long to result in anything. Or this person won't help me. Just to people being able to embrace networking and
mhm.
relationship building and seeing what the results are. I had one client, who basically he was in the process of building out his consulting pipeline, had just started as a consultant, and was telling me every week about how many people he had talked to, and about all these conversations, and they weren't going anywhere. And so as we started really digging into it, we realized that he had started on the safest people he could find, the ones who
Ah,
were strangers, the ones who um really there was no skin in the game whatsoever. and
yeah.
and that can be a valuable tool as well, but what we realized is he was really avoiding his core network
Huh.
because he was worried about what they were going to think about him and the transition that he had made, and leaving leadership levels to go out on his own.
Sure.
And so that's really the key here, is
So,
figuring out
and so
why.
do you work on getting that person comfortable with how do you go to your known network?
Yeah.
What are you offering, and ways to do it that is authentic to them? Because I would imagine everybody needs to find their own style in
Yeah.
that regard, right? Is a little bit of that personality related, but I guess you've got
Yeah.
to be doing it, because if you're not doing those activities, usually your funnel's not, going to be as full as you want it to be.
Yeah. Yeah, what the work here is really understanding why you're resisting it and working at
Mhm.
that root cause, which for this client, for example, what were those insecurities? And so when we
Mhm.
worked to rebuild his confidence, he was able to go out and authentically network in a way that felt really comfortable to him. And it wasn't the friction that he had before, which
Right.
was basically trying to force himself to do something, which never really comes across very well when you're talking to, when
And
you're
not if you're
actually
not
in the
comfortable
networking
with
call.
it. It shows through when you're not comfortable, right?
Yeah.
So you help people fill up the I guess that's the first step, right? Is
Yeah.
figuring out how do you fill up that funnel of activity. But then when you talked about your four pillars, the next one is getting the project, right? Like you're
Right.
interviewing or talking to people. And do you work with clients that maybe have lots of activity in their funnel, but they're having trouble turning those into dollars,
Yeah.
focusing on interviews or how they present themselves?
Yeah. Sometimes it's interviews. A lot of times it's interviews or some form of interviews and a
Mhm.
pitch. And so I help them to really make sure that they are thinking about the process with that client in mind, and teaching
Mhm.
them the skills of what it looks like to be a consultative salesperson, which
Yeah.
is essentially using your consulting skills, right? A lot of times we go into this kind of default interview mode that feels like what it might look like to go interview for a corporate role. And this is a
Yeah.
slightly different perspective and mindset and set of tools that you want to be using in order to demonstrate your thought leadership and ability to, successfully complete whatever the project or goal is for
Yeah.
that
You know
client.
what comes to mind? That's really interesting, because that probably ties back to people having an employee mindset, meaning you leave a corporate job, you do some consulting, and then when you go out really selling your consulting business, are you approaching it like a business, or are you
Mhm.
approaching it like you would have a job search?
Yeah,
And,
it
and I
shows
can
up.
imagine people fall back on that, right? And
Mhm.
them to kind of, because really it's a different presentation of your consulting business than it is interviewing for a role.
Right. That's right. It is a different perspective. And so by default, we would go in with an employee mindset. Like you're saying,
Mhm.
this is a really classic way that employee mindset shows up. And so
Mhm.
helping that client to redirect the way that they're perceiving this conversation, whether it's an interview or a proposal, and
Right.
helping them to really see this as, this is my opportunity to understand what the problem is and listen and describe how I would solve that problem.
Which is really very much so within their consulting skills, right? That's what
Yeah.
consultants do. But so
Yeah.
these are the sort of things that come to mind when the first thing you told me that people change is their mindset.
Mhm.
Right there is an example of they had those skills all along,
Right.
but they were not thinking about them the same way.
Exactly. Exactly. They're still thinking of themselves in one context and not
Mhm,
thinking of themselves in this new context, and
mhm.
how those skills that they've built in the past can translate to that new context. And
And
so
how
that's
do
the
you
key.
think that translates when you get involved in investing in your business? So again, business owner, if you
Yeah.
have an employee mindset, you're not really making any investments as an employee, but as a business owner, sometimes you need to. Do you find that as a barrier for people sometimes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was thinking back to early in my career and how I had put together, a friend and I had put together a proposal to my company to get reimbursed for like $120 seminar. So much time and effort put into this, and so a lot of us from an employee mindset
Huh,
perspective are used to being reimbursed for
right.
that kind of thing or for travel. And so when you switch over into consulting, starting to think about, wow, I might take a trip, for a sales purpose or some educational
Yeah.
purpose and not
Or
get
something
reimbursed.
educational that could help me deliver
Yeah,
my services better or something like that is actually
exactly.
in you.
Exactly. Yeah. So it requires a completely different way of thinking to think about, if I invest in this training or in this coaching or in this,
Yeah.
travel or whatever it is, what is my return on investment? And thinking about it as a CEO versus, I'm expecting to be reimbursed all of the time.
Right. So the people that you have seen, and you're a good example, become successful in their own business are invested in doing that. I mean, recognizing I need to become a business owner. I need to think about my business differently. Or also, I need to think about my business strategic,
Right.
which I think is a challenge sometimes for people as they're the ones delivering the work and
Mhm.
lots of hours and all of that. So, do you work with people on that balance too? Because I imagine that that's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. That comes up so often. Trying to figure out what that balance looks like. And again,
Yeah.
a lot of it relies on digging in and figuring out, why are you texting the client at 9 p.m.? Like, what kind of expectations have you set or not set? And what kind of boundaries, and what's driving you to respond at that time of the day? And what result is that creating? A lot of times it ends up creating where you're thinking, I'm delivering for the client. And instead it's creating a dynamic where the client is losing respect for you because you have no boundary. And so
Yeah.
we work on tools and strategies to
Hmm.
manage the balance, but a lot of it is the way you're thinking about, and the clients are thinking about what they're choosing to do and not do, and helping them to
Hmm.
figure that out at the more root cause level versus figuring out how to manage their actual schedule.
So one of the things that you mentioned to me that I thought was really interesting, and this was through coaching. You obviously are a fan of coaching. You've used coaches a lot yourself, and I think you told me you don't think you would be where you are if you
Mhm.
hadn't had coaches along the way.
Yeah.
Have you had a situation where you got a coach for something specific and you were able to almost triple your business, right?
Yeah.
Some of that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's really investing in, but you eventually saw the return.
Absolutely. Every time I have a coach at all times, that is my standard as a business owner. And I always go into those relationships knowing exactly what is the outcome that I want to achieve, and how
Sure.
can I take ownership of this process along with the coach. And so in the particular instance you were describing, I was having a problem because I didn't see myself as a salesperson or someone who would
Huh.
ever be good at sales. And so I hired a sales coach who was able to
Interesting.
help me over a 12-week period get to the point where I was, I think, maybe 10% close rates, all the way up to 60% close rate in
Wow.
that. And so the coaching paid for itself probably 10x
Yeah, and ongoing because you learn
and ongoing.
skills that you're going to continue to utilize,
Yeah.
which I think also gets to the nirvana for people, which is having enough work and a pipeline that you're choosing which projects you want to do instead of being stuck in a situation where it's like, should I take this?
Mhm.
at a lower rate? Is it better than not having something? I mean, I think where you've gotten to and you help your clients get to is having those choices.
Right.
That's really what everybody wants as an IC, right? Having that. And so you've got a methodology broken down. It's not just, you have your weekly meetings and you focus on all the different pillars within these businesses. I get a lot of questions about how people are finding their next projects. I still see, yes, again, our marketplaces will work, but I still see a lot of networking. I always ask, how'd you get this? And how did that happen? And it's either, friend of a friend or somebody that remembered them. Sometimes we are actually submitting our consultants from our marketplace, and there will be a manager at the client that says, that person's an IC now, I remember him. They just didn't realize that they were, a consultant, because they're not really, populating that out there. So what are some of the things you've seen from people? And I know you have some good takeaways that we can leave with people for how people are finding these projects day to day.
Yeah, I put together a takeaway, a guide for everyone. So I think we'll share the link here in a minute for that. There's 27 stories. I mean, this is a great part of my job, is being able to see the wide range of personalities, a wide range of ways that people, there's not just one way or one right way, one perfect formula for this. So I
imagine your clients, Melisa, have all different skill sets.
Yeah, my clients have all different skill sets and different things that they feel comfortable with and feel authentic to them.
Yeah.
We were sharing a story here. One of my favorite is a client who she was looking for a full-time job. She went out to interviews and landed a offer as a VP at a Fortune 100 company. And she realized this is not where my heart is at all. And so she turned down that offer, which was, really, really difficult for her, and pursued her IC path. And I think it was six. She kept in touch with that hiring manager. They had a good connection. And it was probably 6 months later or so where he reached back out to her and said, hey, I still need some help. Can you come in and consult with me?
Yeah.
And she was shocked. She thought, I thought by turning him down,
like she burned a bridge or something, but
yeah. And so really thinking about all of those different opportunities and the way we engaged with people, and what could be a potential consulting client that might not necessarily fit the image that we have in our mind.
And maybe sometimes too, not worrying about a direct means to an end, meaning lots of conversations, activity. You don't always know where those things are going to lead. And who's going to know who, even maybe right in your own friend circle or, inner circle of parents, friends, and things like that. But you've got to be talking about your business, that you're an IC, that, the types of work that you do. Any other ones that come to mind that are kind of maybe we wouldn't think happen for people?
Yeah, another one that I kind of touching on what you just said, Amy, is people get into oftentimes I notice they're getting into a mode of assuming that certain people can help them, assuming certain people won't help them, and basing their strategy off of that. And in some cases, it leads to disappointment because they're expecting something that doesn't happen. And in other cases, they completely shut off talking to people that could be such a big influence for their next step. So a great example of that is I had a client who just scheduled some very simple interviews with former colleagues and just wanted to ask them for their feedback on what was different about his skill set, what was unique, and just like getting an external perspective on what that former colleague's experience had been with my clients. And that person walked away with two things. Number one, a really a complete completely different perspective on what their value proposition could be and their
Interesting.
differentiators to them, as they're selling their
How that
consulting
person
work.
thought about them was different. That's interesting.
Exactly. And it actually, that simple interview strategy also led to a consulting engagement with that particular
Yeah,
individual. So there could be some really non-threatening ways
right.
of going out and seeking business where you don't have to feel like you're, pitching something really hard and getting
What
rejected.
about pro bono stuff? Do you
Yeah.
ever suggest that?
Yeah, certainly pro bono. One method, and it's actually one of the stories in the takeaway here. One method is the land and expand method. So
Mm,
whether it's pro bono or some kind of a discounted way to get your foot in the door can
hmm.
also be a really good method as a loss. That's the word I was looking for, loss leader. A
Yeah,
good method of getting, if you know that this is an ideal client for me, and I want to get in and really understand their business from the inside, that
right.
can really inform so much of the way that you show up from a sales process, from creating ideas for you about what pitch you might give to them about problems they might not even recognize. And so having that
Huh.
internal visibility can be really valuable in
Yeah, I
looking
would
at
imagine.
that,
And I
whether
guess
pro
that's when
bono.
they're kind of
Yeah,
targeting by client. Like there could be
yeah,
clients or industries
yeah.
that they really want to work with or get into. And so it sounds like you hit on all these different ways for people to dig into that. One of the things that we'll move to the questions in a second, but one of the things that I wanted to bring out that you kind of talked about people thinking about is what are their objectives? And sometimes people don't know. So I guess
Yeah.
being introspective a bit and asking yourself, what am I, what would I call success? Is it,
Mhm.
having a strong pipeline, learning something new and how to sell myself, but understand
Mhm.
before you go to look for a coach, what is it that I'm
Yeah.
trying to do so that you can match the coach to whatever that particular obstacle is.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
And
What is
sometimes
my
that might be hard for people, right? Do they always know what their objectives are?
No, most of us don't, right? And so for a lot of my potential clients or clients or people who I talk to and then refer to other people, they come on the call with a consultation call is the first step. And they come on there with, I have this problem. My business is not consistent, or I feel like I'm going to have to go back to corporate, or
Right.
I just feel horrible all the time. And I thought this was going to give me a sense of freedom. And so really it's a matter of digging in to figure out what is the root cause, what are the true obstacles, and
Yeah.
then creating a plan that can help you start tackling those one by one.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. I think I was going to ask Asia. Looks like we have a couple questions. Asia, do we want to jump to some of that right now?
Yes, absolutely. I've been looking at the questions and getting ready to share them with you. But firstly, thank you both so much for such an interesting, lively discussion. And I'm going to add a couple of my own questions to the list, but I'll go through the
Okay.
ones from the audience first. So one of the first questions comes to this concept of trying to understand pricing in terms of working with an executive coach. Like, how transparent are people in this industry? If somebody's mid-career and they're sort of not knowing if they can actually afford the services of an executive coach, what's your advice to them?
Yeah, a couple of questions there. So I'll tackle the first. The range would be, let's see, I'll give you, from my knowledge of coaching and being in coaching communities, it probably goes from anywhere from like $89 a session, which we could talk about whether or not that's effective or not. What I've found is it's not effective to just kind of spot buy coaching, um,
Uh-huh.
all the way to, I am not in this program, but I have a coach who charges $100,000 a year to be in her mastermind. So it's a very, very wide range. And so rather, one of the things I encourage people to think about is what return am I expecting to get from this investment?
Mhm.
And do I believe that this coach can help me get there? And will I engage to make sure that happens? And so when people think about what I can, a lot of times when people choose coaches based on what they can afford versus what they want to accomplish,
Hmm.
they might not have a good match there. So it's a little bit of a shift in thinking in terms of, again, an investment mindset versus thinking about it from a kind of what can I afford.
That's helpful. And certainly sort of a good challenge to somebody who's thinking about growth. And it sounds like underlying that is the idea of business growth. So another question came through, which is more about advice on what tips can you offer somebody when they're trying to connect with their network to unearth opportunities within a company or within their own, maybe their own setting. Are there any things that you've learned through your coaching career that could be useful to this person asking the question?
Yeah, what I find with people usually is that they freeze up when they think about networking. They think, I'm not going to know what to say. I feel weird because I feel like I'm asking for something. I don't want to bother this person. I don't want to feel indebted to this person. All of these thoughts that we have about ourselves and in the context of networking and the other person. And so what I find for people to really make the most of their networking, to not make it feel like such a torture chamber, is to get to the place where they're thinking about it as a conversation where they can ask a lot of questions and understand the other person. Understand what the other person cares about, understand what challenges the other person has that they might be able to help with, and really make it about the other person versus about them, and feeling like they better have a good pitch or a good way to go in and convince whoever they're talking to that, of whatever their desired outcome is. And so that can take a lot of the pressure off and create into a lot of much more dynamic kinds of conversations that could lead to that person that you're networking with, wanting to work with you, or it might lead to other recommendations of people that you can network with or get leads from and that kind of thing.
And Melissa, what about people just even, I think sometimes just letting their network know that, hey, I went into independent consulting. Like I have found where they will, like I mentioned before, they'll find ex-employers who didn't know that this person was even a consultant. So sometimes if you just let your network know what you're doing, it's not necessarily asking somebody for a project, but you have some value that you're offering out there, and let people know that.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I can't tell you the number of people who almost are like these hidden ICs because they have some idea about what other people are going to think of them. Like, oh no, someone's going to think that I've failed in corporate and this is the only option that,
and I need a job.
Yeah, or I've made up a consulting firm and really it's because that I'm unemployed right now. Yeah. And so absolutely, it's getting really comfortable that I'm an independent consultant. This is what I'm pursuing, and making that so visible so that people do think of you. You're the first person that they think of when they have a problem that you can solve.
That's really, really helpful. And I think that some of this is very commonsensical in some ways, but we need to be reminded of that, right? And we need that maybe a more regular check-in or reminder on that concept. So one of the questions that's come up, it's not directly linked to coaching, but I think it's around sort of trying to understand your skills and expertise. With so much tech out there, what is a good way for somebody to approach really professional development? Where do you go? Like, are there coaches that can help you decide, like, should you train in a specific subset of a skill? Like in this particular instance, somebody's trying to understand, should I be a management consultant for AWS or Salesforce or ServiceNow? So it's more of a content or strategic piece of advice versus
like looking at the market.
Right. So kind of like, exactly, like checking in on the market. Is that a service that falls into the area of something that a coach can help with?
Yeah, I think, yes, it is, in short. What I would say in that specific example is really, number one, helping the person figure out what do they really want versus what do they think might be successful. Because from building a longer term business, we want to gravitate toward things that we really want to be doing, not things that we think are kind of the fad or the easy way. And so really understanding what are the motivations to begin with. And then the other thing that a lot of times I think we might assume is I need to make the right decision, and it kind of sends me down a path that is never to return again, which is not the case. What I find with successful entrepreneurs and ICs is the thought process, using the thought process of I can go out and test, and I can pivot and change and adjust, and really make anything work. The main driver is how am I going to set up something that I'm going to love doing, and have that sense of freedom that a lot of us want when we make this decision to be an IC or independent.
There's a couple of questions that are coming in around the theme of sort of understanding how to engage with a coach. So there's a question around, do you qualify whether somebody's a good coach? Because there's sometimes commitments, and curious to hear what you feel about the concept of a clause or a commitment. And in this particular case, this individual had some great experiences and truly value added, and others that weren't great. So is there a methodology for how you enter into this sort of new experience of leveraging coaches where you go about it the right way?
Yeah, I'll just give you my experience from hiring my own coaches, being the clients.
Right.
The thing that I do is, number one, just really get a good sense of what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. To Amy's point earlier, it's not about, I don't know all of the things, right? But I know, generally speaking, what is the outcome that I want to see at the end, the results.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I figure out, who do I resonate with? It could be anything from seeing content on LinkedIn to getting a referral from someone that's in my network, whatever that the case may be, and then having a conversation with that person about, this what their style is, where they see. One of the great questions that I ask my client, or ask my potential coaches, is who's successful when working with you and who's not, and what kinds of themes do you see there. And the last component of this is, a lot of times we want to put as the coachee, we want to put the onus on our coach to make us successful. And at the end of the day, I'm a coach. I want my clients to be successful, and I want to guide them in the way that sets them up for success. But I'm the one, when I'm the client, doing the work. And a lot of times we want to transfer that responsibility onto a coach, and we miss the opportunity to take a lot of that responsibility on for ourselves. So that's another component too.
Yeah, that's interesting. Great point.
Yeah.
So and I think this is a related question, but in case it teases out something different, there was a question that came into the panelists that said, the decision criteria for finding the right coach for you. So you started to allude to it where you said you had sort of a set of questions or a methodology, but is there, for those of us that are new to this or seeking some sort of a checklist, like here's a couple things we should always do as we're going through the process of selection that will lead us maybe to a better outcome or a better fit?
Yeah. This is a very vulnerable relationship that you would be creating with a coach. You are telling the coach kind of all of the inner stuff going on, right? Your insecurities, your obstacles, your challenges, your perceptions of failures. And so the first and foremost is feeling comfortable with that coach, feeling like you feel safe with that coach. You feel like you can be vulnerable and open and transparent, because that's what leads to the biggest growth. So if you don't have that rapport with someone, a potential coach that you're interviewing, then I would say that number one is a showstopper.
Yeah, it would seem like that relationship can be a vulnerable one, and you have to feel comfortable and safe, but also respect that person knows how to guide you,
right,
and lead you. And so if you're not feeling that connection with somebody, I mean, have you had that, Melisa? Have you interviewed coaches yourself and are like for me personally, this isn't, that style doesn't work? Is that maybe
absolutely
asking them about what works and what doesn't?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I I love nice people, but working with a coach who's just nice isn't going to push me to the place where I need to go in
Yeah.
order to get the transformation. So I might go on a call to interview a coach and have like a great, a nice, pleasant conversation. But if I don't feel like that person's going to push me, then I know
Yeah.
that that's not really necessarily the best fit for me. The other thing to think about too is really understanding and diving into that coach's framework. What tools do they use and what process did they use to guide you? I've made a mistake in the past where I've hired sales coach. I told you I was having a lot of problems with sales. I've had more than one coach in this area. And one of the coaches that I hired, I didn't get into enough detail as possible, as I should have, to understand what her framework was. And because I kind of felt like that was her secret sauce.
She was gonna do it for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in
or more
hindsight,
so of like, this was a secret she would tell me after I paid her, which is a bad way to look at it in hindsight. But I realized once we got started working together that her methods were very much out of alignment with what I would feel was authentic and genuine. And so no matter how much that process works for a lot of people, and she had a lot of good results, but for me it wasn't a good fit because I was constantly just butting up against this feeling of friction for me. So that's something to look at. In addition to the connection, is also really what is the framework and style of the coach.
Excellent point. So a question I think that both of you probably have unique answers to, given, so kind of a dual question. So the person that asked this question had more than a 2-decade career in the Fortune 100 and is sort of pivoting to become an independent consultant. So they sort of have this ability to operate. Prior knowledge and skills development within the corporate world construct was easy for them. How did they set up a good process for accomplishing the same level of these 2 decades of success and growth and development as an IC? And Amy, I'll ask you that first, and then Melisa, I'll ask you, because I think it's actually very valuable for our audience to hear from both lenders. I think it
ties into a lot of what Melisa has talked about, though. That person needs to make the leap in their mind to start with, that now I'm going to be a business owner. And one of the things that I see a lot of is people come out of a career in corporate and they're leading with a resume, when really they should be leading with project, like what kind of project should I use you for? And a lot of what you're reaching back is, hey, I implemented, a learning management system for, 50,000 people, or what. A lot of experience comes from your corporate world, but the way you would talk about it is packaging it into projects, because that's what a consultant or a business owner is going to talk about. And really clients don't care as much about the chronology of a resume. They shouldn't, right? It should be, what can you do for me? And I think, I really resonate a lot with Melisa talking about people making that leap from employee to business owner, because, I've never thought about that before, but it's not conscious. Like, it's like, oh, wait a minute, I need to think differently about how I present myself, all together. I think that person sounds like they are perfect for consulting, because that's what, you have great experience in corporate America, and that's what clients are looking for. How do you package what you've done?
Yeah, that part is such a valuable way to look at this. And there's a couple of methods that I've seen successful with clients, whether they might package it up front, like a CFO, for example. He might package a very clear deliverable where he could go out and be a fractional CFO with very clear results that are easy to sell. As an example. Another way to do it is to go out and talk to your network and talk to people that you would love to work for and understand you're a consultant, right? Go gather their requirements, understand what their pain points are, and then figure out how you could solve those, then develop a product around that and go back to that person and sell it in that way. And the more you do that over and over again, you realize what you love and what you don't love, and who you love working with and who you don't, and can eventually build a product out of that kind of experience.
Wonderful. And I know that, I certainly have uniquely seen this inside our MBO Advantage program, that there are formulas for how to be successful and, build that platform. And then the role of coaching really becomes about, as you said, those personal hurdles, things that you need to overcome to unlock the next level. So there's like a base layer of how you set yourself up and your mindset. And then there's refining and growing that, which is something that you really have touched upon. So a really interesting question, and I know we're getting close to the time when we're going to have to wrap up. So probably I'll suggest that this is our last question since we're nearly at the hour and we've had so much engagement. How do you determine the difference between a great mentor and a great executive coach?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
What I've found, I've had some amazing mentors in my career. What I found though is that I'm not having a meeting with them and this kind of like co-development almost on a weekly basis. And so that to me is one of the biggest differences. And I still utilize mentors, even though I have my own coaches as well, to go out and get their guidance or to go over a certain situation with them. But it all is all very much of a point in time versus having a coach who's on your side, you can ask those questions, who asks you those questions that you really digs into your blind spots, digs into the way of thinking that might have gotten you where you are, but isn't going to get you where you want to go, and creates that cadence for you that will help you to grow much more quickly than what I've personally experienced or see others experience with mentors who certainly have a great value as well in our professional development.
Well, this was so enlightening. Amy, I know as the wonderful moderator, I don't know if you have any other, or really the person asking the probing questions, any other kind of closing thoughts before we wrap up?
This was the natural progression of some of the other series I've done, and hearing from people, how do they find that next client? I didn't even know before I started talking with Melisa that there were people like Melisa that actually focus on a methodology and a strategy around, hey, it's your business. We can help you figure out how to fill up that funnel, how to deliver your services, how to balance between being the CEO and the delivery mechanism. So, that was really I want to help our anybody who wants that for their career. I feel like Melisa, I love to help people reach their potential. And I think some people could use some of what Melisa is offering here to, if it hasn't happened organically, what's missing, and could a coach potentially help you be really successful in filling up that funnel?
Wonderful. Well, I know this is a perfect point to throw up something that Melisa had helped put together, and which will later be sent out as part of the webinar recording to everybody who registered. And there'll be a link to this content, obviously not able to click on it from the screen, but Melisa was able to put together this really neat downloadable guide, which has these real life stories in more of a playbook format for how to land new business. And that's something that will be available on her website. I think you can go there and look at it at melisaliberman.com/27-clients. It's a really neat piece of content. There is a unique opportunity through an MBO preferred relationship to apply for an IC growth strategy call. And I'll let you talk a little bit about what that is, Melisa, rather than me speaking to it on your behalf. And then you could tell everybody about the other ways you could get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. If you feel like coaching could be a good fit for where you're at in your IC business, then the link that Asia is sharing here has a link to my schedule. And so you can apply for a strategy call with me. It's there. I'm literally a zero pressure type of a salesperson. So it's about going in and asking you a lot of questions, understanding where you're at in your business, what your obstacles are. And then if I think coaching would be a good fit for you, I will let you know, and we could talk about what that would look like. Sometimes I'll recommend, or offer coaching with me, and other times I'll give you other resources or suggestions because it might not be the right time, or we might not be the best fit working together. So that's what that call looks like.
That's great.